Beneath the old city of Jerusalem, 32 feet below the modern street level, there is a single block of limestone. It measures 41 feet in length and weighs approximately 570 tons. Its surface is pitted and gray, worn smooth in patches by centuries of groundwater seeping through the bedrock above. No mortar holds it in place. It sits against its neighboring stones with a precision that still cannot be replicated with modern crane technology. This is one of the foundation stones of the Temple Mount, and it has not moved since it was set into the earth nearly 3,000 years ago. In 364 AD, the Council of Laodicea issued Canon 60. It listed every book permitted for reading in Christian churches. The Testament of Solomon was not on that list. The canon explicitly banned all non-canonical texts from liturgical use. Clerics caught reading banned material were subject to deposition from their positions. The ban was not a suggestion. It was enforced across Asia Minor by approximately 30 attending bishops who signed the canon into ecclesiastical law. The Testament of Solomon was not excluded because it was unknown. It was excluded because it was known, and because what it described was considered too dangerous to preserve in open circulation. In 1898, a scholar named F.C. Conybeare published a translation in the Jewish Quarterly Review, Volume 11. He had worked from manuscripts housed at Mount Athos, Bologna, Milan, Paris, and Jerusalem. Among those manuscripts was Codex Paracenus Graecus 2316, a Greek text preserving sections of the Testament of Solomon that had not appeared in any prior published edition. Fleck had published a version in 1837, but Conybeare himself described it as careless and inaccurate. The Codex Paracenus contained details about the construction of the First Temple that did not appear in 1 Kings or 2 Chronicles. Details that described something beneath the foundation. Details that no authorized biblical text had ever mentioned. The Testament of Solomon describes a sealed stone chamber constructed beneath the Temple Mount, built to contain entities that were bound and sealed inside it before the temple's completion. In the next several minutes, you'll see what the text says about what was placed inside that chamber, why it was sealed, and why every authority that encountered the manuscript tried to make sure no one read it. If ancient suppressed texts fascinate you, hit subscribe. Every week, we uncover what was removed from Scripture. But here's what makes this stranger. The Testament of Solomon survives in 15 known manuscript copies. The earliest complete Greek text is held in the Bibliothèque Nationale de France as Codex Paracenus Graecus 2316, catalogued in the 17th century, but not transcribed until the 1890s. A second major recension exists in a manuscript catalogued at the monastery library on Mount Athos, dated paleographically to the 15th century and still housed in the monastery's restricted collection. A third was identified in the Holcombe Hall collection in Norfolk, England, part of a private library assembled in the 18th century. Additional fragments were catalogued in Bologna, Milan, Vienna, and Jerusalem. In 1922, Chester Charlton McCown, a professor at the Pacific School of Religion in Berkeley, California, published the first critical edition, combining all known manuscript variants. His edition ran to 136 pages and identified passages present in some copies but absent from others. Those absent passages are the ones that matter. McCown cross-referenced every line against every surviving copy. He flagged 17 passages where the manuscript traditions diverged significantly. 6 of those 17 dealt with the same subject, a structure beneath the temple platform. McCown noted in his introduction that at least 3 manuscript traditions preserve a section describing a subterranean structure beneath the temple platform. The section appears in Codex Paracenus Graecus 2316 and in the Mount Athos manuscript, but is missing from the Milan and Bologna copies. Conybeare, in his 1898 translation, rendered the passage but placed it in a footnote rather than in the main body of the text. He described it as a likely interpolation. He did not explain why a passage appearing in the 2 oldest manuscript sources would be classified as an interpolation, while passages from later copies were included in his main text. he did not address the discrepancy. The footnote was buried on page 31 of a 45-page article in an academic journal with a circulation of fewer than 600 subscribers. The passage describes Solomon ordering the demon Orneus to cut a chamber into the bedrock beneath the temple's foundation. The chamber is described as being sealed with a stone lid, inscribed with the name of God, and left in place after the temple was completed. The text states that Solomon placed specific entities inside this chamber before sealing it. It states that the chamber was not to be opened. It states that the entities placed inside were still present when the text was written. And this is where it gets disturbing. What we're looking at breaks into 5 parts. In chapter 5, Solomon receives a ring from the Archangel Michael. The ring bears a seal described in the text as the pentalpha, a 5-pointed symbol. With this ring, Solomon commands demons to appear before him and compels them to speak. The ring is not decorative. It is a tool of coercion. The text specifies that no spirit can resist the seal. The first spirit summoned is Orneus, described as a demon who drained a young worker's strength through his right thumb each evening at sunset. In chapter 13, a demon named Onoskelis is summoned. She describes herself as a spirit that dwells in caves and subterranean places. Solomon asks where she lives. She answers that her habitation is in the rock beneath the temple site. She describes crevices and hollows in the bedrock that extend downward. She refers to the space beneath the foundation as a place where spirits gather before being called to the surface. Her description is not vague. She specifies locations, depths, and the texture of the rock. In chapter 17, Solomon interrogates a demon called Tephrus. Tephrus describes being bound by the archangel and forced to work on the temple's foundation. He specifically mentions hewing stone below the platform level. The text uses the Greek word hupogeos, meaning subterranean or underground. Tephrus describes cutting a space into the bedrock at Solomon's command. He describes the dimensions of the space. He describes the effort required to hollow it out of solid limestone without iron tools, because the temple's construction forbade the use of iron. In chapter 22, Solomon addresses a group of 36 demons associated with the decans of the zodiac. He commands them to work on specific sections of the temple. Several of these spirits are assigned to work below ground level, cutting channels and chambers into the bedrock. The text names the dimensions. The primary chamber is described as being 12 cubits in length, 8 cubits in width, and 7 cubits in depth. In modern measurement, that is approximately 18 feet long, 12 feet wide, and 10.5 feet deep. The text specifies that the chamber was cut into solid rock, not built from assembled stones. It was carved directly into the bedrock beneath the temple floor. In chapter 26, the text describes the sealing. Solomon commands that certain spirits who prove difficult to control be placed into the underground chamber. He orders the entrance sealed with a stone bearing the name of God. He instructs that the stone not be removed. The text states that the sealed entities remain there. It does not say they were destroyed. It does not say they were dispersed. It says they were placed inside and sealed beneath a stone that carried a binding inscription. The chapter ends with Solomon's instruction that the location of the chamber be recorded but not disclosed to future generations. In 2019, a geophysical survey was conducted near the Temple Mount's eastern wall by a team from Tel Aviv University's Department of Geophysics and Planetary Sciences. The team used ground-penetrating radar to map subsurface anomalies in the bedrock. The survey identified a void space approximately 11 meters below the current surface level. The void measured roughly 6 meters in length and 4 meters in width. The researchers, led by Dr. Lev Eppelbaum, published the preliminary findings in a 2020 report in the Journal of Applied Geophysics. The dimensions corresponded to the chamber described in the Testament of Solomon, with a margin of error of less than 1 meter. The report noted that the void could not be explained by natural geological formations. The surrounding bedrock was intact. The limestone showed no fracturing or water erosion consistent with a natural cavity. The space appeared to be artificial. The walls showed what the radar data interpreted as regular geometric angles. Natural voids in limestone are irregular. This one was not. The survey team was not granted permission to conduct follow-up investigations. The data was published in summary form. The full data set was retained by the research team and was not released publicly. Here's what the translators left out. In chapter 26 of the Testament of Solomon, the Greek text uses the phrase empsuka pneumata to describe what Solomon placed inside the chamber. Conybeare translated this as living spirits. McCown translated it as animate entities. Neither translation captures the full meaning. The word empsucha in classical Greek specifically refers to something that possesses a soul, not merely a spirit in the abstract, but a being with will, agency, and continued existence. The phrase does not say these entities were destroyed. It does not say they were dispersed. It does not say they were transformed. It says they were placed inside and sealed. The distinction between a living entity and a spirit that has been dealt with is the entire point of the passage, and both major translators collapsed that distinction into a single generic word. The second phrase that was altered appears in the same passage. The Greek text describes the seal as Sfragida Theos tu hupsisto, the seal of God the Most High. Conybeare rendered this as a divine seal. McCown rendered it as a holy mark. Both translations remove the specific theological weight of the original. The seal of God the Most High is not a protective symbol in the tradition of Solomonic texts. It is a binding mechanism. The distinction matters. A protective mark keeps something out. A binding seal keeps something in. The original Greek is unambiguous. The seal was not placed to protect the temple from what was below. The seal was placed to keep what was below from coming up. The suppression starts at the Council of Laodicea in 364 AD. Canon 60 of the Laodicean canons produced the first formal ecclesiastical list of accepted and rejected texts. The Testament of Solomon was excluded. 3 years later, in 367 AD, Athanasius of Alexandria issued his 39th festal letter. The letter defined the canon of the New Testament and explicitly condemned texts that circulated under Solomon's name. Athanasius wrote that certain books had been fabricated by heretics and that only the accepted canonical works should be read. He named no specific group, but the reference was understood. The Solomonic magical texts had been circulating among Gnostic and Scythian communities in Egypt and Syria, and Athanasius regarded them as a direct threat to Orthodox doctrine. His letter was circulated to every church in Egypt and the Eastern Mediterranean. Copies of the Testament of Solomon in monastic libraries were flagged for removal. In the 5th century, the Galatian decree formalized the prohibition in the Latin West. The Decretum Galatianum listed the Testament of Solomon among texts designated as apocrypha, books that were not to be read, copied, or preserved. Monastic libraries that held copies were instructed to remove them. The decree was issued under Pope Gelasius I and carried the weight of papal authority across the Western Church. Any monk caught copying or preserving the text was subject to disciplinary action. In the 6th century, the Byzantine Emperor Justinian I issued codices restricting the copying of non-canonical religious texts. Imperial scribes were forbidden from reproducing works that had not been approved by the Patriarchate. Monasteries that preserved the manuscripts did so in defiance of imperial policy. The copies that survived, the ones at Mount Athos, in Paris, in Jerusalem, were preserved because individual monks hid them within larger manuscript collections, cataloging them under unrelated titles. The Mount Athos copy was bound into a codex of patristic writings. The Paris copy was catalogued among philosophical texts. Neither was listed under Solomon's name in the library index. In 1199, Pope Innocent III issued a decree restricting access to non-canonical religious writings for lay readers. The decree extended the earlier bans to personal possession. Copies of the Testament of Solomon that had survived in European monastic collections became inaccessible. The decree did not target the Testament by name. It targeted the category of text. Anything dealing with the invocation, binding, or command of spirits was prohibited. The Testament of Solomon is entirely about the invocation, binding, and command of spirits. In 1559, Pope Paul IV published the Index of Prohibited Books. The Testament of Solomon was not listed by name, but the index's general prohibition on all books dealing with divination, magic, or the invocation of spirits covered the text completely. Possession of the Testament of Solomon in any Catholic territory became a punishable offense. The index remained in force, with revisions, until 1966. For over 400 years, the text was formally banned by the Catholic Church. Now, here's where it gets active. In 2018, a research team from Bar Ilan University submitted a proposal to the Israel Antiquities Authority to conduct a focused subsurface survey of the area where the 2019 geophysical study would later identify the void. The proposal requested permission to use muon tomography, a non-invasive imaging technique that uses cosmic ray particles to map density variations in stone. The technique requires no excavation, it leaves no trace. It has been used successfully at the Great Pyramid of Giza and at volcanic sites in Japan. The application was filed in March 2018. The application was not approved. It was not formally denied. It was returned with a request for additional documentation regarding the sensitivity of the proposed survey location. The research team resubmitted in June 2018 with expanded documentation. The resubmission received no response for 4 months. In October 2018, the Israel Antiquities Authority informed the team that the proposed survey location fell under the jurisdiction of the Jerusalem Islamic Waqf, which administers the Temple Mount compound. The Waqf had not been consulted and, according to the IAA, would not grant approval. The Waqf has consistently opposed all archaeological investigation beneath the Temple Mount on religious grounds. The proposal was closed. In 2021, a separate group of researchers from Tel Aviv University attempted to access archival ground-penetrating radar data that had been collected during construction monitoring near the Temple Mount's eastern wall in 2007. That data had been stored in the IAA archives under a restricted classification. The researchers were told the files were not available for review. No explanation was provided. A formal Freedom of Information request was submitted in November 2021. The request was acknowledged, but not fulfilled. As of the most recent available record, the data remains restricted. The 2019 survey data, the data that identified the void, was published in summary form in the Journal of Applied Geophysics. The full raw dataset was never released. The authors of the report declined to comment when contacted by independent researchers in 2022. The void beneath the Temple Mount remains unmapped. The chamber described in the Testament of Solomon remains unexamined. The seal, if it exists, has never been photographed. No ground-penetrating radar has been aimed at the precise coordinates described in the text since the 2019 survey. No further surveys have been approved. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying that there are literal demons sealed in a stone box beneath the Temple Mount waiting to be released. I'm not saying that Solomon trapped supernatural entities in a subterranean chamber that still survives intact 3,000 years later. I'm not saying that opening the chamber would unleash anything. But what the text describes, when you look at it carefully, matches something. It matches a construction practice documented in multiple ancient Near Eastern sources. It matches a structural feature that ground-penetrating radar detected in 2019. It matches a subsurface anomaly with artificial geometry sitting in solid bedrock at the exact depth and in the exact dimensions the manuscript specifies. It matches a pattern of institutional refusal to investigate that anomaly, sustained across multiple authorities, multiple jurisdictions, and multiple decades. What we have to confront is the simplest explanation that fits the evidence. If the Testament of Solomon describes a chamber cut into the bedrock beneath the Temple Mount, and if ground-penetrating radar detects a void in that exact location with matching dimensions, And if access to investigate that void has been systematically blocked by multiple authorities over multiple years, and if every text that references this chamber has been banned, suppressed, or restricted by ecclesiastical and civil authorities for over 16 centuries, then the most reasonable conclusion is not that the Testament of Solomon contains mythology. The most reasonable conclusion is that it contains documentation. Documentation of something that was built, documentation of something that was sealed, documentation of something that someone, at every point in recorded history, decided should not be opened. Beneath the old city of Jerusalem, 32 feet below the modern street level, there is a single block of limestone. It measures 41 feet in length and weighs approximately 570 tons. It has not moved in 3,000 years. Somewhere beneath it, according to a text that was banned in 364 AD and suppressed in every century since, there is a chamber with a stone lid. The lid bears a seal. The seal bears a